One man is growing old and one man is being told that his land is not his own now. He has no place called home. He must learn to be and grow and find time to feed his soul. When he learns to be alone, he will find that he is whole. Gonna break free tonight. Gonna take these chains, gonna make it through the night. Hello, everybody. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams, and I am welcoming back special guest author, award-winning author, publisher, and researcher, Mr. Brad Olsen, and he is back with us today here on Making Life Brighter, and we're going to continue our series about the Golden Age and all of his research and work that he's been doing, most specifically down in Antarctica. And his books, the Modern Esoteric, Beyond Esoteric, and Future Esoteric, are in-depth studies of the history of and the origins of our Earth as we know it today, and how that's impacted us, and how that is factoring into some of the research that's coming due and present right now in our reality and where we're headed to. So if you would like to get those books in a signed copy, you can go to CCC Publishing and get your own signed copy there. And so I just want to welcome back Mr. Brad Olsen. Welcome, Brad. Thank you for being with us again today and here on Making Life Brighter.
Oh, thanks, Winifred. It's always great to talk to you. Thanks for having me on again and continuing this fascinating discussion.
Yes, we touched on some great things last time, and I want to jump back into what it is that we were focused on. But just as another recap, you all have seen him on Ancient Aliens. You know who Brad is. And if you are a UFO aficionado back at home, you may have even seen him at Contact in the Desert. And he's been on to the UFO mega conference, and he's been part of the 5D events and dozens of radio shows like Coast to Coast and Ground Zero and Patriot Underground. So he's very familiar to you, and his books and his research have been groundbreaking. He's taken deep dives down into the Incan, Mayan, ancient cultures around the world and brought that back with some very pertinent information and how that affects us today in our society. So, Brad, let's talk a little bit about Beyond Esoteric and why you wrote that book and what your recent research is down in Antarctica. What's the purpose behind the third book?
Sure. Well, I don't repeat myself, so I have a lot of information. As I was doing the first two, there were some chapters that I was working on that didn't fit in the first two that I was saving for the third book in the trilogy. Beyond Esoteric then being in this modern age, but moving forward into this strange new world, we find ourselves with different health warnings coming out that weren't there before. So I finished this book during the last COVID lockdown, and it gave me that opportunity to really hunker down and get this one done. So it has current to this modern time and this age, but also taking a look back into much of the suppressed technology and other very fascinating subjects such as crystallography and exotic metals such as monatomic gold, what that was all about, and so many of the things that are considered esoteric subjects.
So let's jump into that a little bit. What is monatomic gold?
Well, it is a substance that has been used by the ancients in such a way that it can help make this transition into multidimensional bodies. There was an excretion that was found in the King's Chamber, the Great Pyramid, a white powder, when the first Brits were there examining around, and someone had the great foresight to collect a little bit of it, and it went out back to the UK and the British Museum. And in more recent times, it was tested to be a residue of monatomic gold, that the pharaohs and the Egyptian people were using this monatomic gold to take them into a more advanced state. And this, again, is a technology, and in this case, a resource that has just been rediscovered. Now monatomic gold is being made and people are using it and having these kind of incredible similar results of being able to transcend out of their bodies. But monatomic gold is not quite like the gold that we see in Fort Knox, although that's probably not even there anymore. The monatomic gold is more white and powder in nature, and as a result, it can be ingested. And when ingested, it will then help the mind even open the pineal gland to having more of these exotic experiences.
You focused on the pineal gland quite a bit in one of your previous books.
Yes.
And the pineal gland is considered the gateway, if you will, right? It's sort of the biological gateway to a spiritual connection, if you will, or assists in that dimensional experience. And so would you say that the monoatomics in your research were used for that, or were people using it like, say, people would use mushrooms today? Or what's the purpose really of using that? Because as humans, from what I understand, we can naturally go there. We don't need an assist, but why would they use it?
Well, that's a good point. And with mushrooms, you do feel the effect. It does take you into an altered state, but you're intoxicated with it. I've tried monatomic gold and I did not feel intoxicated in any such a way, but there was an opening of my psychic abilities, which I think is what it was used for. So it was known in the ancient world as a secret substance that can regenerate the body, unlock psychic powers, and allow us to access higher states of consciousness. They're also known more commonly as ORMs, ORMES, and this is orbitally rearranged molecules.
So is this more like something you take almost like an elixir, like a vitamin of sorts, but it's more cosmic?
That's exactly what it is.
And It's gold, right? It's literally
it's gold, but it's a different kind of gold. You see, monatomic elements, and let's just examine that word, mono being one, atomic, they are exotic metals, but they only exist one atom at a time in their non-metallic state. So they become superconductive, and then they allow for spontaneous transmutation to exist. So when electricity currents pass through these elements, there is virtually no impedance to the flow. So modern electrical technology is only now beginning to detect these specific elements, which have been difficult to with instrumentation, because different monatomic elements each have their own superconductive properties. The monatomic elements seem to increase the level of photons in the cell, as well as reorganizing their active function, which happen to promote health. Because ORMs are superconductors, they tend to ride on the magnetic field of the Earth, giving it the powers even of levitation. That is, the monatomic gold being one atom actually levitates. It's not of a solid, it's not of the air. It's somewhere right there in between.
It's kind of suspended. That's amazing. So is it something that people should take? Is it something that is safe to take? Do you know?
No, it was perfectly safe for me. It can sometimes be hard to get, at least the really pure kind that you want to use. But it can be acquired. And there are even varieties of it that can be taken as a supplement. And
interesting. So,
grows out here in California where I'm at in the Sierra Nevadas. There is an outcropping of a certain kind of rock that has monatomic gold, and it can be absorbed by a plant that is then used as a supplement.
oh, great. Well, you see, here's another reason we're moving along toward the golden age, aren't we? We're going back to what they knew a long time ago. Well, they say that gold gets leached out of our brains due to our current environment. And so people are having more and more Alzheimer's and other things besides just short circuiting and on too many EMFs going through our brain, but that there's an ancient way of recircuiting that might be similar to what you're talking about, where you take a true gold coin and you put it in a glass teapot and you steep that so that you get some of that gold, and it helps with your memory and your brain. And I always thought that was fascinating, but maybe this is a much easier way. So you mentioned also crystals. What did you say about the crystal research that you were doing and that you found there? What was that?
Well, crystals, again, are going to be some of the technology of the future. Crystals have virtually unlimited storage as far as retaining records that we put into it. In fact, the Akashic records are said to be crystalline in nature, and they hold the entire story, not only of Earth, but of the universe. So if we really want to find out who we are and where we came from and all the secrets there within, it will be tapping into these Akashic records in a crystalline form, because it has, virtually unlimited storage.
Sorry, excuse me. Do you believe in the crystal skulls, the ancient ones?
Well, it's not a matter of believing in them. I've seen them. I've been near the Mitchell Hedges skull, and I can tell you it has incredible properties that you really have to see it to believe it. Not only do you look into that crystal skull and see, well, you could say they're reflections, but they take on a different kind of nature than just, say, looking into a quartz crystal. They were built using technology. They were carved with some kind of tools and machining craft that, again, we're still playing catch up to understand. And so therefore, those crystal skulls have many more questions than answers when it comes to understanding how they were made and what they were used for.
Well, on that note, we're going to take a quick break with Brad Olsen, and we're going to be right back. We have so much more to cover. We're going to go into his research in Antarctica. This is so fascinating. I love this. And you're listening to Making Life Brighter. Stay tuned, everybody. We'll be right back with more Brad Olsen right here. And we're back. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams. You can follow along on iTunes. You can subscribe, and we are syndicated on iHeartRadio. We're in 160 different countries around the world, and we love it when you share, and appreciate you for listening all these years. Thank you so much. This has been a wonderful journey, and I'm so happy to be back with you. We are preparing you and the planet for the golden age. And to kick that off, we have award-winning author and amazing researcher, Brad Olsen. And you can find out more about Brad at bradolsen.com. So, Brad, crystal skulls and record keepers. I wonder what they would say about all the nefarious things that have happened on this planet.
Oh, well, they'd have a few things to say, I'm sure. Maybe not so kind either.
That's right. Well, truth, like you emphasize, the truth needs to come out. And you have been particularly balanced in your writing regarding how truth leads to a kind of understanding, and the understanding leads to love. And the love is what you're saying the world is about, technically. And at the end of the day, everything's going to come back to love. And that seems very generic to say the person that's tuning in to say, oh, of course it does. But you mean that in the way that you're speaking about right now, which is frequency, harmony, advanced states of consciousness. That's what you're referring to, correct?
Yes, that's right. And really, it is embracing the love emotion that's going to help us in this shift to the golden age, to this 5D frequency. You can't really ascend unless you discover love in your heart and start caring for your fellow human beings, as well as the planet itself and all the animals that exist on it. We're all in this together. And as the custodians of the surface world, humans have more responsibility to embrace this love vibration, to care for the planet. And this is how it's done. So the sooner you can start to do it, and little things matter, even your thoughts matter, but I'll give $1 to a homeless person and help any way I can. That's being in service to all. So if you embrace wisdom, charity, and compassion as things that you'll do every day, you will be in that 5D movement into this great golden age. This is what is going to be required of each of us as individuals.
I'm with you. I'm on board. I'm on board on the sentient craft that's going to the golden age. Now let's talk. I don't know what gave it away. Let's talk about your research. And speaking of craft, we have some additional space programs. So let's start there. Let's talk about this technology of monoatomics used when and all the things that they seem to know that we don't know. You brought to light additional space programs. Let's start with that and talk about why there would even be an additional space program here in the United States.
Well, but there has been a secret space program for many decades. And I think it's all part of this slow drip of disclosure. I saw that Tucker Carlson, of all people on Fox News, is interviewing one of my colleagues, Christopher O'Brien, about the cattle mutilation phenomenon. And that's on mainstream media. So obviously one of his higher ups has approved that show. And this is all part of starting to condition us to thinking in a different way, to incorporating a much bigger umbrella than we have so far been given. And part of that expansion of our awareness is going to be that we have these crafts, some that have been backward engineered and some that are going through these secret space programs that have cumulatively come out to be the new Space Force, which was just
Donald Trump implemented that back in 2019 in the spring, and he rolled out the Space Force flag, and we haven't heard anything about them since. Now I know some people that feel they've seen the Space Force go over in somehow or another, but why is that important? Why do we need the Space Force?
Well, it's part of the disclosure because they've had these very advanced flying craft for many decades. People are witnessing them and filming them on their phones, and it's getting to the point where the Pentagon is going to lose all credibility unless they start coming forth and saying, yeah, well, we have this program, it's called the Space Force. And that would then supersede all the conspiracies about the secret space program. But I've, as mentioned, know several of these super soldiers who have been off planet. It's called the 20 and back. They'll go out for 20 years and then come back to Earth. Some of them will stay off planet. There are bases and colonies on Mars, for example, and some of them never do come back, but maybe it's not their choice. Maybe it is their choice, but there are people living off planet in this breakaway civilization. And how do they survive? Well, they have to have some kind of support still from Earth, including the technology to get from point A to point B.
Yeah. And do they have med beds? Do they actually use
they
this
do
kind
indeed.
of
Captain K, Randy Kramer has described in great detail in a book that I wrote. I don't think he's published it yet. that he has been not only lost limbs that have been regenerated, but actually gotten his head blown off, and they were able to keep his soul near the body until they reconstructed the head, and then back he goes into the body time and time again. So there's this kind of technology that these super soldiers are becoming exposed to and using. And this is something else that's just going to be such a mind-blowing revelation once it starts coming out to all the rest of us.
Well, that begs another question, because as we understand it, in the more, we'll say, new agey sort of advanced spiritual world, there's a progression of soul. So if you lose an arm and you get it back, and you don't have, say, an end date to your experience here on Earth, and you can just keep regenerating and stay here, that changes the entire game, right? That changes what you're doing here on Earth to begin with. It might change the duration of lifetimes, the duration of a life or a soul journey in a body altogether. Now, I would imagine that they're doing that so that they can perpetuate them wherever they're existing, out in the Kuiper Belt or out in Mars or wherever they've gone to for whatever reasons. Do you know why they're there?
Well, it's exploration. Why did the Europeans leave in the age of exploration to sail around the world? They're looking for resources. They're looking for opportunities. There is an intergalactic trade that occurs, much along the lines of a barter system, not really money so much. It's, I have some goods and you have some goods, and let's find a balance to trade them off. That this is going on, Tony Rodriguez was quite aware of it, and he has a new book about the Ceres colony. And I actually shared a room with him at a convention in Las Vegas last year, and we became really good buddies. I tell you, there's nothing like sharing a hotel room with someone, and I did it with Jordan Maxwell one year for a conference, and we too became great friends. And boy, you can pick someone's mind in the middle of the night and think of something. Hey, Tony, tell me about the trade colony.
Oh my God.
Rattle it off. And so these guys are very consistent in their information they're bringing forth. The stories don't change. They remember it like we can remember our childhood with vivid clarity. And sometimes, in often cases with these super soldiers who do these 20 and backs, they will get their memories swiped, but through different techniques, you can get your memory back, and not only with such clarity to remember what had happened, but to even write a book about it. And several of them have.
Do they have families, or do they just
have a family, but it's usually after the fact. Randy Kramer was married to a super soldier off planet, but she was injured so bad they could not reconstruct her body in time, and the spirit then drifted off. And so he lost a wife off planet, according to his book.
Amazing. Amazing. See, this is not your ordinary conversation. Now, going back to your research regarding crystalline energy, you had mentioned the monoatomics, and then you mentioned about crystalline energy, and we were talking about Space Force and all that. It's my understanding, and please correct me, that some of these alien spacecraft are fueled, if you will, by toroidal fields that are sentient fields that are sparked by a consciousness of sorts, and they are generated and run with some crystalline energy. Is that right?
Well, that sure is. And that's what Bob Lazar said Element 115 was all about. And when bombarded with different other energies, will create even more abundant energy. And that's how this over unity is employed to power these craft. Interestingly, this was known to the ancients, most notably in Atlantis. One of his trances that Edgar Cayce went into, he spoke of the fire crystals that was used by Atlantis to power their cities. And he said that when Atlantis fell into the ocean, that one of these power fire crystals was left operating, and it is still to this day generating electricity in an
Wow.
area known as the Bermuda
Bermuda
Triangle.
Triangle.
This
Of
is
course.
where all these anomalies come from. Even the missing time is from this fire crystal still generating vortex energy and other kind of phenomenon that have been reported in this area called the Bermuda Triangle. And right smack dab in the middle of that triangle is where this fire crystal still lies on the bottom of the Atlantic Ocean.
Now, do you know about sun disks? Are you familiar with sun disks and what that is? Because we stumbled upon that in one of the quantum healing meditations that I was doing, and we ended up creating a vector between a crystalline mine that happened to be a main sun disk in Arkansas, and then the one up in Herkimer, New York, and then out to Bermuda Triangle. So there was some kind of vectoring that went on there. It wasn't known to me till after the fact. I didn't know it, but I saw it. So what is a sun disk, and why is that important given what you just said?
Well, I believe there are several different kinds of sun disks. The one I'm most familiar with was found in South America, and it was gold and had quite a few symbols on it, and would also interact with the people much along the lines as the crystal skulls did. And it is
sort of like a vectoring point, huh? It
yeah,
seemed like
so.
that, like an energy center of sorts. And
Yeah.
I would imagine that if the area under the Bermuda Triangle is still lit, wherever that is, it's also acting as an energy portal or an energy vector point, something that would cause energy to come or go. In some cases over the Bermuda Triangle, it's a whole nother dimension. And I'm guessing that's also what you're discovering down in Antarctica, is there's portals and there's these flows, these ancient flows.
That is what was reported. I've not been in a portal. I did go down to Antarctica about 4 years ago and went down there as a researcher. As far as I know, I'm the only one that actually went there to look into a lot of these claims that there are giant craft under the ice, to pyramids poking through, to antediluvian civilizations, as well as the globalists with bases below the ice. And I will tell you this, that Antarctica is the most volcanically active continent in the world. 91 known active volcanoes, and 99% of the continent is covered in ice. Some places 2.2 miles thick over the polar plateau of eastern Antarctica. So you have the propensity of these large under ice domes to form from the geothermal activity that would create them.
On that note, we're going to take a quick break and we'll be right back right here on Making Life Brighter. Stay tuned for more Brad Olsen. We're going to get into what's going on down in Antarctica. We'll be right back. And we're back. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and we have special guest Brad Olsen here, and he is an award-winning author and speaker and researcher, and he has his own publishing company, CCC Publishing. So if you'd like to get his book Beyond Esoteric to go further into what we're discussing today, and all of his books for that matter, you can get signed copies by going to CCC Publishing, and it's Future Esoteric, Beyond Esoteric, and Modern Esoteric. So back to where we were, because this conversation is so fascinating. You were one of the few people that's gone down there, and one of the only people that's seen some of these things that they've been discussing. What did you find?
Well, I didn't see the craft under the ice. I didn't go to the pyramid locations, although I know where at least one of them are. And I did not see any antediluvian civilization or globalist headquarters underground. But I can tell you that's probably where John Kerry went when he went down there in 2016 during the election. Yeah, he was there when Trump got elected, and you'd think he would have been up in North America campaigning for his party, but nope, he was down in Antarctica, and he went missing for several days. Not missing, but nobody knows where he went further afield after his plane and entourage with the Secretary of State landed in McMurdo Base. He went further afield, presumably to one of these globalist enclaves which exist below the ice. So there's great evidence that not only at that time of John Kerry, but just earlier this year, that Klaus Schwab and Christine Lagarde from the EU and the Davos group, that they went down there and they thought they were getting their marching orders from maybe not even human. Here we go back to the Anunnaki, or perhaps some kind of human-like but not quite human superior life form who feels they hold dominion over this planet. And these higher ups are more like captains and colonels, where the real generals could be down in Antarctica giving the orders to their minions as to how they want to run things. And so they were then dispatched to a place, I kid you not, Rothschild Island. And this was a location that Dr. Michael Sala told me about when I told him I was going down to the Palmer Peninsula on a sailboat. And I asked him, what should I check out in this particular area? And he said, if you can, go sail by Rothschild Island. Well, that's below the Antarctic Circle. So it was another couple hundred miles away from where I got to, which was just about to the Antarctic Circle. But this is a really mysterious place because the elite go there. And not only that, but they have some kind of HARP weather manipulation system operating off of Rothschild Island. So there's this great YouTube video creator named Dabu7. And a couple of years ago, he had this video showing the whole globe and this frequency wave, kind of like the ripples on a water, coming out from Rothschild Island up over the hemispheres all the way to Greece. And that's when those big fires started in Greece. So the supposition was that these weather manipulation devices along the lines of the big HARP arrays, which can manipulate the upper atmosphere and change different weather patterns. They can also trigger earthquakes or volcanoes, but certainly steer any kind of weather formation into a certain region. So not as to say that they were lighting the fires, but perhaps creating the high winds. So all it took was a spark, and then those big fires were raging all over Greece that summer. And so I'm out here in California, and there's a whole lot of talk that these fires are also triggered by direct energy weapons, and it is to depopulate the state. They want to greatly reduce the amount of people that live in the state of California. And I, for one, am plotting my exit from here. This is just getting a little too much, and I can see the writing on the wall. Yeah, but as for Antarctica, lots of weird stuff and a lot of underground bases all the way back to the Nazis, who were staking their claim in this area of Queen Maud land that they called New Schwabenland.
And so when you went down there, you didn't see those things because you didn't go deep enough, or you didn't go to that place? I mean, there seems to be a whole city that's down there somewhere, but what is it that you actually encountered?
Well, what I encountered was the Palmer Peninsula, which is the little finger of Antarctica that sticks up towards South America. And so we went down on a sailboat. It was a 26-day excursion. And that is the closest connection, land connection to Antarctica. So while I didn't get to any underground bases or get to see anything like that, I did make some other kind of discoveries. And that is that there is a big no-fly zone near the South Pole at about the 89-degree parallel. You can't find it on Google Earth. I've tried many times. I know where it's at, but they'll screen it off. And so I do a presentation called The Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica at some of the conferences I go to. And I will be doing it at the Orlando conference, which will be Alex Collier's final conference. If anybody's down in Florida, try to check that out the third week of October. And I'll be giving the Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica talk, and basically saying that there are all these things down there, and you can see some of them on Google Earth, but you cannot see the big hole under the ice. And that is where Admiral Byrd, as an aviator, said he flew a plane into it. It was such a large gaping hole, it was big enough to circle down around and come back out. And it was a whole different world down there, he reported. And it's probably where Prince Harry and his friends went cross-country skiing for a week on the polar plateau from the South Pole Amundsen Scott base. 1 week over the polar plateau, nothing to see there, except maybe they're going to see that big gaping hole and perhaps even go down in it.
Well, how do you get out of it? I mean, if you go into some place and who's in there? And,
yeah, who's in there?
You know,
will they let you out?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, that's interesting you brought that up, because Linda Moulton Howe, another colleague of mine, we speak on a panel at Contact in the Desert on Antarctica. We've had many one-offs talking to each other, but she had this whistleblower named Brian S. And everything I've heard from Brian S. really does check out from what I know about Antarctica and understand about the regions where he was operating. And he said he flew a plane, much against orders, through the no-fly zone. It was an emergency evacuation from Pole Station to the Davis Australian station, and the direct flight was through the no-fly zone. And that's when he saw the big gaping hole. And in fact, there was a road leading down into it that you could take a big cat that they use at ski mountains for grooming. But that's also how they move equipment to the South Pole Station from McMurdo, is over the ice with these big snow cats that pull along a train of other cats to bring supplies farther afield. And so you can even keep going down this cat track into a road that circles down into the big hole.
Into nowhere land if you come back out. Now, what do you think? We're going to have to go to break in just a minute, but what do you think is the purpose of all that down there if there is another civilization down underneath?
Well, that's why the NSA, no such agency, didn't even admit it existed until the 1980s. That's why the NSA operates not only at South Pole Station, but they also have an unmarked building in McMurdo, and they are tasked with everything extraterrestrial, not only crash retrieval, but also creating the cover story, such as this case, to cover up that this hole in the ice even exists. That
it's merely a volcanic anomaly. That's right. But it could be a portal. It could be a whole nother dimension, a portal in a dimension. It's sort of like the Bermuda Triangle on steroids. And on that note, we'll be right back with Brad Olsen right here on Making Life Brighter Radio. Stay tuned and like us on Facebook, and you can follow along on Twitter under Winifred Adams. And we'll be right back. You're listening to Making Life Brighter Radio, and I'm your host, Winifred Adams, and we are featuring our return special guest today, Mr. Brad Olsen, and he is an award-winning author. He has written the books Modern Esoteric, Future Esoteric, and Beyond Esoteric. And you can get those books that we're speaking about today and his research and work, which is phenomenal. And he's explored far and wide, and his books literally should be in classrooms and is considered, in my opinion, true history. So I encourage you to get all of that and get a signed copy. You can get them at cccpublishing.com. So Brad, tell us more about why these bases exist and what is it that they're still doing? Like, what's the point? What's the purpose?
Well, if you look at the whole globe of planet Earth, and if you wanted to be out of the purview of, say, satellites or drones or anything that could see what you're going on, the best places to hide would be the deepest depths of the ocean and under the ice of Antarctica. where no sign of you could be seen. And so if you are a terrestrial-based species, for example, to be able to find one of these under ice large domes that's geothermically heated wouldn't even be too unpleasant to be down there. You're certainly sheltered from the extreme cold and the storms of the surface. And maybe you can even jump in and take a hot spring once in a while and relax a bit. So it doesn't sound like that terrible of an existence. But more importantly, it is a way to stay hidden and disguise from anything that would be snooping with cameras from above.
Now, do you really believe that the Nazis were working down there during World War II, and that was a place for them to gain extraterrestrial technology if there's a portal there?
Well, it's not my belief. It's a common fact that the Germans went down there pre-World War II to claim this large swash of land called New Schwabenland, as they named it. It's basically directly south of South Africa. And keep in mind, during World War II, South Africa was still an apartheid nation and very sympathetic to the Nazi Germany. So it was a supply depot before the ships and submarines were making their way down there. And the part of the legend goes that the Nazis had allied with some of the malevolent ET forces, most namely the reptilians, who gave to them an unused base that they then expanded into the New Berlin base, as it was known, a different kind of Shangri-La, according to Admiral Dolence, who said that we have founded for our Fuhrer an impregnable fortress in a land of ice, pretty much describing Antarctica. Now, it could be Greenland, and there was the Thule base that the Nazis also founded, which is now an air base to the US forces. But the Germans, with their very advanced U-boat, that is submarine technology, were able to go under the Arctic ice cap, for example, and find some of these very far-flung locations, including under the ice in Antarctica. And in my presentation, The Hidden Anomalies of Antarctica, I'll show you pictures of what the continent looks like with the ice, and then without the ice, you can see that there's these giant fjords that go right into the center of the continent. In fact, even bisect Western and Eastern Antarctica. So these fearless U-boat navigators could have gone not just hundreds of miles, but perhaps over 1,000 miles under the ice. Wow. And even connect out on the other side of the continent.
Well, you know, it kind of speaks to ley lines, and they say there's inner Earth people and there's inner Earth civilizations, and I don't know. I guess if that's what you can get to and can witness and see, then it is what it is. It's like going out to another planet and existing there. We're here, and so we know this. Do you think it's a dimensional frequency difference, or it's an actual physical space? Is it a portal in time that you go through in a different dimension down there, or is it actual like 3D reality just down there?
Well, my experience was very much just a 3D reality, but I'll tell you, it's like no other place that I visited on Earth. It's truly a frozen continent. It's very stark in its extremity. There are no trees, there's no bushes, there's no land animals. The biggest life form that exists on the continent is a tiny little cricket. That's all that can survive there. Now, under the water, you have all kinds of marine mammals from several species of seals and whales, of course, penguins, many species of penguins, which only live in the southern hemisphere, by the way. A lot of people think that there are walruses down there. Nope, that's only the Arctic area and no penguins. Where down in the south, there are penguins, which do come up to South Africa and South America. Several countries in South America, namely Chile and Argentina, have colonies of penguins, as well as around New Zealand and south of Australia.
Are they 10 feet tall?
Well, the emperor penguins are, if you recall, they're big ones. They're the biggest ones. Then the king penguins. The colonies I saw were the Adelaide, the chinstrap, and the Gin2 penguins, which were about the same size, but we would joke that you could smell the colony before you could see it, because when they're up on land, they're breeding and having their nests, and boy, do they squawk a lot and smell a lot too. But they're really fun to watch, and we saw quite a few colonies of penguins. Now the Adelaides, they are the southernmost of those penguin groups. They are on the decline, so there is a kind of climate change that is affecting Antarctica. But what's so fascinating is that there are some regions in Antarctica that are melting quite rapidly, but there are some regions of Antarctica that are colder than average and increasing in ice. And I suppose this is how Mother Nature, in her infinite wisdom, keeps the balance of the ocean. That's why Miami Beach isn't underwater, as Al Gore said it would be in An Inconvenient Truth. Or I'm right out here in Santa Cruz. We have the 100-year-old beach boardwalk that is still not inundated. So there is a lot of confusion as to what is going on with global warming and how it affects the different continents.
That's true. And we really have a new adventure in front of us, and how to survive, which is part of the purpose of this show, is bringing those solutions to the table, and the research and the understanding, so people have a better understanding of how to take on the next few years, because it's happening quickly, whatever's happening. Now, let me ask you this, because we just have a minute left here. Have you ever had contact with aliens yourself?
Not CE5, which is the face-to-face or in your presence. I've seen quite a bit of activity in the sky.
Yes.
Close Encounters of the Third Kind up at the Seaseti Ranch in Washington State, up and above and around Mount Shasta, as well as Crater Lake. Common denominator of all those three is they're all volcanic sites, and that is where most UFO sightings occur, at, above, or around volcanoes. And that's a whole other discussion we could have about volcanoes and what might exist inside, much similar to Antarctica.
Wonderful. Well, on that note, we want to thank you so much for being here at Making Life Brighter, and spending your time and research with us, and introducing us to all your amazing research. And if you'd like to go on to the third supplement of this, you can go on to the Patreon channel of Winifred Adams, and we'll have another follow-up here with Brad Olsen. If you'd like to get his books, you can again go to cccpublishing.com. You can get them there, and they are Modern Esoteric, Future Esoteric, and Beyond Esoteric. And we're going to go into that. Let's talk about that next. So you can follow us along there. Brad, what makes your life brighter?
I like to see that we are having a great awakening of the human race, and that I could be alive to witness it and play the small role that I play in helping people understand the great changes that are afoot, and just to help be one of the narrators of this wonderful journey, this story that we're seeing unfold before our eyes.
Beautiful. On that note, thank you for listening, everybody. Go jolly, and we'll see you on the Patreon channel. We'll see you back here on Making Life Brighter. Hello, everybody. You're listening to Making Life Brighter, and this is Winifred Adams, and we have a special supplement here with award-winning author, researcher, and special author of Modern Esoteric, Beyond Esoteric, and Future Esoteric, Mr. Brad Olsen. And you've heard Brad on Making Life Brighter Radio twice before, and we've covered some of his research about Antarctica and monoatomics, and some of the things that he's researched and talked about in terms of secret societies, ancient societies, the money systems. He knows so much, and all his research over time has brought him to the place of familiarity with you because you've seen him on the History Channel. You've seen him on Ancient Aliens. He's been on, different coast to coast shows, for example, and Ground Zero and Patriot Underground. You have also probably experienced him if you're a UFO fan at Contact in the Desert or UFO mega conference, and at 5D events. And so he's also author of Sacred Places, 108 Destinations. And he's just a wealth of knowledge. So I'm very pleased to have him back with us. And if you haven't heard the other shows, please go back to Making Life Brighter and Making Life Brighter Radio on the Variety Channel and VoiceAmerica or on iHeartRadio. You can find us on iTunes and Apple and Spotify and check out those shows we did there. So Brad Olsen, welcome back. Thank you for being here with us again.
Oh, hi, Winifred. It's always great to talk to you. We did some great shows on your radio program, and now we can see each other on video and talk about what we didn't get to or that might be uncensored.
Yeah, I like the uncensored part mostly. Honestly, I do. I've I've realized that we have so much that we really need to say, but we don't get to say. And so it makes it for a difficult, continuous and contiguous train of thought. And you've been really, really helpful to people in understanding your research on the previous shows that we've done. And we focused on your research down in Antarctica. We focused on all the different things that you have put forth your focus to regarding ancient civilizations and alien technologies. So I wanted to go into some of the things that we haven't really touched on. And one question that's burning in me is that, do you remember lifetimes in Atlantis or Lemuria? Do you have recall of those lifetimes?
I do have a perception that I was alive for several lifetimes in each of those civilizations. Those are just the two most recent antediluvian. According to Madame Blavatsky, that there were 5 high civilizations on this planet, the oldest being the Hyperboreans, which go back millions of years. And this would then correspond to some of the UPARTs, the out-of-place artifacts, such as a gear found in a seam of coal in Siberia that was at a level where it could only have been placed in that seam of coal millions of years ago. So the evidence is quite profound that there have been multiple civilizations on this earth, some of which have fallen into the ocean. And there you find underwater artifacts such as Yonaguni in the southern archipelago of Japan, which is a whole carved plateau of rock underneath the water. And then there are other locations such as off the coast of Cuba, where there are pyramids and ceremonial plazas that appear as if they were one of the Mesoamerican cities above the water. So really, the history of this planet has been greatly edited, putting it lightly, that we have no knowledge of where we come from, or as author Graham Hancock says, that we're a species that suffers from amnesia because we just don't know the ancient history that ties into the world we live in today.
Well, clearly they need more monoatomics in their food so that they can remember.
That would help.
Or we could enlighten some more, and then we might remember. But the idea of previous lifetimes, had this struck you prior to your research? Is this something that you thought about or believed in before you began this work?
Well, it's interesting you bring that up, because I grew up with parents who dropped out of the Catholic Church and Lutheran Church and were essentially atheists. And so I came into this world with a clean slate, let's just say, like a blackboard with no markings on it, no basic dogma or any kind of belief system that would lead me one way or another. It was just an open book, right? And it wasn't until I started traveling around the world, in fact, my first European backpacking trip in 1988, that I started having experiences in different locations. The very first time was in Pompeii, Italy. And I literally knew my way around this ancient city. I was with an Australian guy I was traveling with. And I said, oh yeah, well, we could go up here and turn left and we'll find the Colosseum. And it still gives me goosebumps to this day to talk about it and these feelings that I had living in Pompeii. And then of course it happened in other locations, European, medieval, old cities that were still intact, having memories of being there. And of course in Egypt, almost everybody that goes to Egypt, if they're perceptive and open to this idea of multiple lifetimes, will remember at least one, if not several lifetimes in Egypt, just because it goes so far back. And it was the mother civilization that led rise to all the Western civilizations that we know of today.
I know so many ancient truths come out of Egypt. And I've always been saying in my medical intuition work and healing that we're moving back toward light and sound. And like we discussed in the previous show on radio, the technologies that are out there that do exist for preserving a body or retuning a body, if you will, exists, and it may be a dimensional frequency away, but the light and sound, like the Ankh, I don't think people understand the Ankh was a tuning fork at the time. What do you know about the Ankh?
Well, isn't it interesting that the Ankh looks very similar to the Christian cross, except it has a little rounded area on the very top. You can see a lot of pharaohs, excuse me, carrying the Ankh with that handle-like top. Now, what it could have been used for, I guess, is open to interpretation, but it should.
And so the Ankh means what to you?
Everlasting life, using the Ankh in ceremony to represent the cross of male and female and the circle as the wheel of karma, or the many lifetimes that we live upon.
Interesting. So much of the ancient truths are surfacing again. And this is really your line of work. It's kind of what you're doing in this world now today. And you're bringing forth these things that I wouldn't say were hidden. They just haven't been common. And now you're exposing those things and you're giving meaning and reason to them on more than one level, not only historical value, but perhaps spiritual value as well, as we discussed in one of the shows about the megaliths and the other things being crystal laden and so forth. So working with some of the ancient truths and the things that you've come across personally or discovered, what's been one of the most just spine-tingling, amazing memories of your discoveries and work so far?
Well, I had the great opportunity of being able to travel quite extensively, 50 some countries, all 7 continents. And it was on my 3-year world tour after teaching English in Japan. And I self-finance all my own trips, always have, that I found myself in Egypt. And it was a full moon on March 1993. And I climbed to the top of the Great Pyramid. You're not supposed to do it. And I could have gotten in trouble if I got caught, but I put on my invisibility cloak. And after I was meditating for a bit and just overwhelmed by the sheer beauty of being up there on a full moon night and the darkness of the Sierra on one Sahara Desert on the one side and the lights of Cairo on the other, I just started to listen to my intuition. And my grandfather, who was very influential in my life, had passed away while I was teaching English in Japan. And I felt sorrow that I wasn't able to make it to his funeral. And I felt like he came to me and said, look where you're at. You're living the dream there, baby. Just keep on going and don't worry that you missed my funeral, I know how much we loved each other, and I'm watching over you now, and I still think he's there. And just coming in tune with not only my guides, but also my own past life recall. And at that moment, I went from being mostly atheistic in my beliefs to understanding that we each have a spirit within us, much like the bumper sticker that says you're not having a human having a spiritual experience, you're a spirit having the human experience.
I love that. I love that. That's a brilliant story. That's a brilliant discovery too. And it almost takes a vector point sometimes to dial those places in, but it feels like that happens. In other words, I'm sure in some of your research that through these ancient civilizations that you've explored down in Peru and so forth, it sure seems like those people had a take on what would be coming one day. Like they had an idea that whatever they did was sort of important and that it would have a legacy for the right time in the right place in the future. What do you think about that?
Well, they did, and they would even sometimes write about future dates or incorporate it into their calendar, such as the Mayans did with their calendar, forecasting this era that would begin in the year 2012. And my first series of books before the esoteric series of books was on sacred places. And just like the Great Pyramid was such a profound experience in my life, many of these other locations that I write about it's a 4-book series. I did 3. I did Sacred Places Around the World, North America, and Sacred Places Europe. And I had another author that did Sacred Places of Goddess sites around the world. And each one was 108 destinations. And we encourage people to go to these locations and getting their information, because not only myself, but I've heard from so many other people and readers that when they went there, they took a moment and just meditated while the whole landscape is in front of them. The message of these places comes through loud and clear. And I can't tell you how many times I've been at these locations and experienced that and gotten additional information that you can't just read in the brochure or a history book about it, but a way to communicate with the ancestors and really feel this ancient wisdom that's oftentimes incorporated into the actual design of the location itself.
Could you feel that at the top of the pyramid?
Oh, definitely.
Yeah,
Oh,
you must have felt so much
undoubtedly.
energy. I wonder how you held on.
Well, it actually focuses up. All pyramids, including this little guy I got right here, will naturally, just by the shape and formation of a pyramid, focus energy up through the top. If we had the proper devices to monitor that, we would see it happening. And you could look on the internet and find the power of pyramids and see some of these ways to see how pyramids naturally are conductors of this energy, which pops out through the top.
So it's kind of a portal creator, if you will, or a shift through dimensional space and time. What's one of the more fascinating things that you've come across that you didn't expect to discover that you did? Like what really blew your mind and had you contemplate it?
Well, I've been to Southeast Asia on several occasions. And the very first time I was coming through after I taught English in Japan in 1993, it was still pretty dangerous to go there, that there were still landmines and ordinances that could go off if you stepped on them. So I missed going to the temples of Angkor until 2003 on another trip back there. And I'll tell you, Winifred, it is number 2 only to the Great Pyramids and antiquities in Egypt as the most outstanding sacred place and larger environs. They go all the way up to the Thai border. We went up to this mountain area where the water comes from, and there were sculptures of Vishnu carved right into the creek bed where all the water flows over Vishnu
Wow.
to bless the temples below. It's called Phanam Kulan. I write about it in my Sacred Places Around the World book. And then the temples of Angkor being so expansive. It's not just Angkor Wat, which is pretty much the crown jewel of all of the sites, but you have the Bayon site with the Mona Lisa like Buddha with a slight smile on its face, to other locations where the banyan trees still grow out of the temple. So you feel like Indiana Jones exploring some of these ruins. Highly recommend Cambodia and the whole general area of Southeast Asia. The Buddhist people, I find, are the friendliest people of all the cultures of the world. They rarely ever hassle you for money or to stay there. And it's still an intact culture, where in Luang Prabang in Laos, it's still a medieval Buddhist city. And every morning, the monks will come out with their bowl, and they'll just walk the street with their heads down, and people will put in rice and fruit and other food, and they'll just barely acknowledge you because they're in so deep meditation and gratitude, because that's the only food they'll eat for the entire day.
Oh, that's beautiful. Really. You were speaking in your book, Modern Esoteric, about, you were quoting people in history talking about how societies are controlled by food and by electricity. And we are coming to a place right now where we're looking at that. We may yet be controlled by food or food shortages right now, upcoming. What can you lend to that regarding some of your research and the things that you've seen in a way to get through that?
Well, you might want to look into becoming a breatharian, where you're just feeding off the prana of the earth. I can't say that I'm adept at that at all, but I find it fascinating and wouldn't mind. Well, that'll be a good period for fasting then, wouldn't it, if these food shortages are coming? But really, it's the old Boy Scout motto, and that is be prepared in every kind of way, not only having supplies on hand and food stocks, but being prepared mentally, because we are going up against an age-old system, this control grid that wants to keep us in this box. And now that we're opening it up, and it's the Great Awakening instead of the Great Reset, where we'll go down this terrible road of fascism, a new kind of fascism incorporating technology that will keep the human race enslaved for a very long time, if that timeline too is what is happening. And this is certainly what this globalist agenda is trying to push us into, this transhumanist world, whereas we have all of that inside of us already. We don't need this extra technology to take us down that road. The Tibetan monks have showed us that we have those psi abilities within us, and we can do incredible things, including even auditive levitation and doing things with our own mind, such as telekinesis, the bending of spoons, and such great powers within us. This is what they're trying to keep us from knowing about ourselves.
Yes, if we
have it all
if
within.
we end up having a opportunity, let's say, with food shortage or electrical grid, disturbance, which is possible just naturally from the CMEs that are coming from the sun or other things, we have an opportunity at that point to maybe practice a little bit more of what you were talking about with the monk with the bowl, and taking gratitude to a new level. I'd like to ask you about how you've seen cooperation across the different countries and continents that you've visited. What struck you about cooperation in different civilizations that civilizations in different countries and cultures? Thank you. That's the word I'm looking for.
Sure. Well, we know that by far a large majority of humans on this planet live on $2 or less per day. That's all they can make. And so there is a form of collectivism in these poorer countries that we're not really experiencing here in the Western world, because we're very wealthy. We don't have to do that. We can make our own income and buy our own stuff. But it does make kind of sense to work together in a community. As the saying goes, many hands make a lighter load. So like the Amish will all come together and build a house in one day for one of their people. And that makes a lot of sense. If you could go and help 20 times to build a house for one of your friends, they'll come together and build a house for you in one day at a much lower cost. So there are many things that we can learn from the primitive cultures. In fact, I have a chapter in Modern Esoteric called Primitive Wisdom. And much of this primitive wisdom has just been lost on us, but a lot of it is really in tune with the natural cycles and even observing the animals and their behavior. For example, when the Sumatra tsunami hit, very few animals or people in the Andaman Islands, which were hugely impacted by that tsunami, nobody died because they saw the animals run into the hills when the water sucked out of the shallow bays. They instinctively knew that there was going to be a 20-foot wall of water coming, and it did, and they ran for the hills. And so it was mostly people that were not paying attention, or the Westerners who were there visiting in Thailand and some other countries that experienced the greatest loss of life.
Now, do you expect that to happen on our coasts and in this time coming?
Well, I could never hope for that or wish that upon anyone, but I would say once again to be prepared. And if there were a pole shift scenario, and it's known to have occurred on many occasions, and we're kind of coming into that period where we're due for one again. Boy, being on a coast would not be the place to be. It would create what's known as slosh, sort of when you shake a bowl and it reverberates all around the bowl for quite a long time, even after the earthquake or volcano ended. You could have tidal waves that would take out the Golden Gate Bridge, for example, in San Francisco, and wash all the way up to the foothills of the Sierras here in California. Are some of the projections up to 3,000 feet elevation.
That's hard to imagine. That's really hard to believe, but it certainly is. Well, they were talking about that most recent volcanic activity off the East Coast across the way. And if that slid off, it actually went into the ocean, that same scenario would play out on the East Coast. And maybe that's not through yet either. So, obviously we don't hope for these things, but talking realistically about the changes that are happening in our world and what may be coming, these are things that are important to, I've always been a preparedness person. And actually I set up one of the first worldwide disaster preparedness programs in Malibu. And They didn't have that then. And I said, how could you not have that? I'm from the East Coast, and like, I would know that. Like, why? How could you be here and not have that in earthquake country? And so we did it. We set it up. It was then taken on by the world after that. But you in your travels, you wrote the book Sacred Places, 108 destinations. What's the 8? 108.
Well, 108 is a sacred number in Eastern countries. It is prime number, divisible many times. It's 108 beads on a mala necklace. It's often incorporated into the temple itself, such as Bora Bora has 108 of those Buddhas meditating in a little encasement, to 108 wheels around the temple at Sarnath and many others in Nepal. It's just incorporated into the numbers. 2 squared by 3 cubed equals 108. So there's a lot of tricks you can do with that number 108. And it wasn't unknown to the ancients either, because it's found incorporated into many of the sacred sites around the world, not just in the Eastern countries, but also some here in the West too. You mentioned the earthquake in the Canary Islands, and in the
Yes.
fourth printing of Beyond Esoteric, I have the sequence that was detected in a perfect grid pattern. So there you can see most likely HARP trying to trigger that Canary Island into breaking off and creating a massive tsunami that would have traveled all the way across the Atlantic and impacted North America, the Caribbean, and South America as well. But it didn't work because there are forces greater than we can understand that were keeping it from doing that, although they were trying, and they played their hand because it was very noticeable on the seismic machines that we use to detect these devices in this perfect grid pattern. And as we know, Mother Nature doesn't work in perfect grid patterns, nor does she work in right angles, and leaving us these telltale signs of megaliths below the water in perfect right angle formation, such as the Bimini Roads in the Bahamas off the island of Bimini is another underwater location. We talked about some other ones in the radio show. So good point to make as far as how that was trying to be triggered.
Yeah, and the fact that, you know, you've several times talked about HARP and how that's been so instrumental in the control of things and weather and so on. You know, I have actually felt that. I don't know if you felt it or ever had the experience of it, but they were using it and practicing with it off the West Coast there. And when they were doing it, I was being so vibrated. It was a most disturbing feeling. I can't even tell you. It just created complete dissonance in my body. And each time they would turn it on and do it, I would literally have to get in the car and go and drive several miles away to get out of it. And one day I went to a nursery nearby and another lady that was very sensitive came too. And I said, "Oh, what are you doing here?" She goes, "Oh, did you see those aliens? Those aliens are over my house right now." And so I came here to get away from that energy. Now, HARP is not necessarily alien energy, but that's what she was talking about at the time that this was also going on. And so there's an alien base that's off the coast there in Southern California, right out off of Point Dume. And I've seen them. I've seen them come up the coast and dip out there and go 100 miles an hour and go into the ocean. And all these things are, you know, people think it's far out or it's out there, but I can tell you, just like you've experienced, it's firsthand knowledge. That is real, and it's very disturbing to the biology. Imagine the birds and the animals that can't get away from that or go somewhere, and the trees that have to keep taking this abuse by humans. The human mind has so much potential to do good. I hope that we can come to that place where we are given the grace to do better, I guess, if you say it that way. So if you can pick a culture that was really so it imprinted on you most, besides the Buddhist temple, but the culture itself, which one would that be?
Well, I really like the people in Peru, the wisdom keepers of the former Incans are still there, and they do have telepathic exchanges and interaction with extraterrestrials. One of the locations of the Great White Brotherhood, where benevolent ETs, is below the surface of Lake Titicaca, that giant alpine lake, the largest in the world, spanning between Peru and Bolivia. And so the people around there they're perfectly fine with the idea of interacting with extraterrestrials. And in fact, we had some come on our trip and travel along with us, did several ceremony, and they would talk quite matter-of-factly. Yeah, well, they visited us and we talked, and
Really?
shared, oh yeah.
Who would come to talk to them? Which ETs? What
some
kind?
of these benevolent ETs, the Great White Brotherhood type ETs. and they would speak to the humans very matter of factly. They didn't have a problem with coming and having a CE5 interaction with them, and would often tell them, there are you still have psychopaths on this world that are changing the weather and doing all these things, and we're telling you as the human race that you have to make some kind of impact to change. And of course, in Beyond Esoteric, I have a chapter on geoengineering and getting into a lot of what you just said there, using the HARP arrays and this technology to move the weather around, make these macro impacts on the planet. And so they were warned. They were saying, you have to challenge these powers that have this ability to change the weather, and by extension, change your growing season and change the cycles of the planet. And this is wrong. This is an aberration against the Mother Nature and her mystical and magical systems that have been put in place and operating for a long time. So when you play God and you try to change all that, it's certainly upsetting the natural cycle of things and should be taken into account.
Well, given the fact that alien technology could assist human bodies, human beings to, live a better life or an easier life, or should have been implemented all the way along, let's say, do you feel that taking on more technology like that is good for us, or can we handle it at this point?
Yeah. You can't handle the truth. Well,
most
Jack
can't.
Nicholson movie, Tom Cruise. Most can't, but no, we have to confront it. We have to handle the truth, because it's going to change the world. This is this slippery slope we talk about called transhumanism, where they're trying to inject into our body microchips and so many other things that come with these injections. And this is an abomination. This is going against our free will, going against our natural abilities.
And we don't need it.
We don't need it. We can do it all naturally with our own minds if we're properly trained to do so. And so that's why I take a step back from all this stuff and say, hey, slow down. We don't even know what we're getting into yet. You want to start injecting us with microchips that are going to change the way we think and feel about ourselves and our bodies? Before you even do that, why don't we have a discussion whether that's even necessary? So we're really going into the changes here headstrong and quite recklessly, without knowing the long-term ramifications of what that means, what it means to be human, right? We're taking that away before we even understand what it means to do this with these injections. And now they're trying to get video gamers to think it's so cool to put a microchip in your head so you don't even have to use your hands when you play video games. This is where this is going, and you can tell that it's quite a slick marketing campaign to try to get us to think, oh, this is not a big deal at all. I can play my video games without using my hands, just with the ability of my mind. But you're putting something in there that you might not be able to take out. So I would certainly err to caution before you make such a move.
Well, that's a really good point, because it speaks to, choice, and it also speaks to the human spirit. And the human spirit is what's at war here as well. And to hijack the human spirit in place of something that is distracting or can be distracting at a moment's notice, instead of being on point with inspiration from spirit. I think that's, if we're talking about the golden age and going into the golden age, we are alluding to the idea of being spiritually inclined, not necessarily a human robot, not something that is programmed, but rather something that's working with divine inspiration or meeting divine inspiration. So the golden age is upon us, and it's going to be interesting to see which way we go, how we traverse this next little bit of time, because in that time could be within the next year, even how we come out the other side. Many people I know, because I'm doing healing work, many people are not well suddenly, not well, liver tumors, left, right, and center, tumors here, tumors there. It's frightening. And from being on this side of it and looking at it and people saying, help me, it's scary, because it's, we don't know the outcome totally, but we can assist. We're just hoping that the energies catch up sooner, right? So as you look at the golden age, as you think about and contemplate moving into the golden age, what does 0 point in the golden age mean to you?
Well, 0 point is part of some of this backward engineered technology that achieves anti-gravity. And so in the terms of physics, it will allow us to build these devices, whether by our own ingenuity or using backward engineered technology. But this is how we will eventually start to explore the cosmos. Remember the TV show Star Trek that came out in the mid-1960s? This was Gene Roddenberry who did the writing for this. He was sitting in on these seances, for lack of better term, which was called the Council of Nine. And he was sitting there watching them interact and speak with future humans from 350 years ahead of time. And he based that whole Star Trek series on humans exploring the galaxy 350 years in the future. So that's 300 years from now is when Star Trek takes place with humans. Captain Kirk was human born. Spock was extraterrestrial, and so were others like the Klingons from other systems, who I think were really the reptilians. And we have the potential on this golden age trajectory to be a Star Trek future. But it's been said that our Star Trek future is right now, and it's being hijacked from us, that we actually have that technology, the 0 point technology of our Star Trek future in the secret space program, and now by extension, the Space Force, but we're not being told about it. So it's being withheld from us and being employed and being used in certain factions, but it's not the Star Trek future that Gene Roddenberry was told that we were going to do, but that would be in the golden age, in this future timeline 1 scenario, when we do unlock all of these patents that have been withheld, the free energy technology, the spacefaring technology using 0 point to go forward and explore the universe for the benefit of all humankind. And that's what I want to see us go into, that trajectory. And that is not the transhumanist and using a lot of these technologies to control us. Look, technology is just what it is. So for example, a hammer, you can use it to build your shelter and keep you safe and warm in times of storm or inclement weather. You could also use it to bash someone's head in, right? And so technology is the same way. It is just what it is. It's how we use it, either for ill or good. And of course, we need to be very mindful and have a philosophical discussion whether we want to jump headlong into this transhumanist future, which I think is a trap. Once you go in, you cannot get out. And think about AI in the same way, that if we let this take over, we can maybe not get the genie back in the bottle if we do. So we should be very careful with AI in letting it become this overarching influence into our lives without really understanding what it is first.
What do you think is missing from the perspective and point of view of the ancient civilizations that would sort of be looking at us today, let's say?
Great question. Really, it's the human element. It is who we are and our innate human abilities, these superhuman abilities that we have within all of us. But look, we've put fluoride in the water and fluoride in toothpaste, and fluoride calcifies our pineal gland. So there's a concerted effort from keeping us from having these superhuman abilities. And that's what this control agenda is all about. That's what the prison planet is, keeping us in this construct so we can't escape it. Because once we do, there is no going back. You never want to go back to that enslavement form of controlling us. And that's what we all need to really endeavor in a personal way, is bringing forth these abilities that we have innately within all of us. So I never use fluoride toothpaste, haven't for over a decade. I'm going to go get my alkaline water at the New Leaf store right after this, fill up my 5-gallon jug. And so there are things you can do in your everyday life to really enhance the ability to tap back into this human element, which I think the advanced human societies in the antediluvian civilizations once had this ability, and we can come right back into it once we know how to do it. But certainly to clean up our bodies so it's receptive, such as our pineal gland, and able to receive this information once we do.
I love that point. The pineal gland is so vital and so important, and you go into it in depth. It's wonderful. And so I do recommend that you all reach out and get your signed copies of his books, because as I said in the radio shows, they really should be in course curriculum. These books should be history. They are like textbooks, but they're a wonderful read, and everything in the way that you write comes across with, as I said before, balance and love. And that's really important because it allows you to take in information, in a lot of information, and synthesize it more easily. It's not being broadcast at you in such a manner, but it's really wonderful. So I really, again, encourage everyone to go get your signed copy. Now, we didn't get into, because we ran out of time, the elongated skulls and what you found there. So can we touch on that? Because I would really like to know your take on the elongated skulls and what they found, because correct me if I'm wrong, but were they short people with elongated skulls? They were tall.
Giants.
The giants. But what was it that was up in the above Peru, above Machu Picchu? There was another village, and this is where some of the elongated skulls were, correct?
Not in Machu Picchu, but in the Sacred Valley.
Okay, that's where.
Yeah.
Right. So
go ahead.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Well, I have a chapter in Beyond Esoteric called Suppressed Human Origins, where I get into a lot of this, including some pictures in the back here that I'm flipping to. And here's one of these elongated skulls from the Sacred Valley, where the head is as large as the torso. So what is found and what is known about these giants, and some other picture I'll just show you on some proportion from the largest to the smallest. And these largest ones have these elongated skulls that you can see here are quite different from the humans. So they have 30% larger cranial capacity. So just above and beyond 30% larger skull. Now there's what's known as cranial deformation, and that is wrapping the skull, putting a board on it, and you can change the appearance of a human skull, but you cannot add 30% larger cranial capacity, no matter how many times you wrap it and put a board around it, because that's a 30% larger brain too. So in these elongated skulls, also commonly called cone heads, because they do point out to the back. And I think they were making fun of them on Saturday Night Live. That was sort of a veiled disclosure when they did the Conehead
I
skits.
saw that.
Yeah, that there were these very large-headed, much larger heads than humans. So when you think larger head, larger body. And again, down in South America, they're quite resigned to the whole idea that there was this different species that lived among them. In fact, in a museum in Ecuador, they even do a life-size replica of one of these giants, and it's about 12 feet tall, much, much, much taller than any human, even with pituitary gland disruption, some of the gigantism you find in humans, much taller than them. So it's not like an anomaly. It's not like a one-off where you'd have the Alton giant, the tallest living human in modern record, in Alton, Illinois, not too far away from where I grew up in Illinois, well, closer down to St. Louis. But the point is that these elongated skulls came in many varieties and can be found all around the world. There's a whole bunch of them that have been found in the Black Sea region of Eastern Europe, for example. But by far, the largest concentration comes from the Sacred Valley and the environs around there. Quite interestingly, a lot of the burials are found among the megalithic ruins. Right there in Sacsayhuaman above Cusco, giants found. Around the Sacred Valley, up in the royal burial areas, were found some of these buried giants, some of them still adolescents. And the one that we saw in a museum was ritually murdered. So it was hit in the back of the head, yet buried in the royal tombs, high above the Sacred Valleys. So we're talking about 18,000 foot elevation where some of these were found. Living there in times of antiquity, most likely were the ruling class, considered living gods, and they were subject to living as kings in those times. So it just makes this much more interesting. As I said, Alex Collier on the radio show, I mentioned that he was given the question, who really owns the planet, or who considers it their dominion? And he said the Anunnaki. And I think that's who these giant skulls were.
I was going to ask you. Yeah.
Yeah. Hybrid. Well, they hybrided with the humans, became the Nephilim, where they were able to even give birth to even subgiant species. And these are the elongated skulls that we find today, not just in Peru, but as I mentioned, all around the world in various locations, these elongated skulls have been found. My colleague, Brian Forrester, he posts about it quite a bit on his page on Facebook, and he was on the trip with us to South America, and I've met him at conferences before, and we get along great, really good friends, and he shares information and some of these photos with me. And he too has come to the conclusion that they were a hybrid race. And this even came out in some of the genetic testings that they have done, finding that it was mitochondrial DNA on the mother's side was human, but the father's side is an unknown DNA type. So just like the Bible said that these giants of renown found the women beautiful enough that they mated with them and they had this hybrid species. You know, it's very similar to the way that a horse and a donkey can mate, even though they're different species, and the end result is a mule, which is oftentimes sterile, and mules cannot have their own offspring, but two similar species can mate and sometimes have a one-off, and maybe that's who the Nephilim were.
Well, clearly they had to be more than the one-off because they were found in different places, but I can't imagine giving birth to that. Can't imagine having the world's biggest baby.
I'd have to have a cesarean section for that.
But how do you understand the Anunnaki influence? What What did that do here on Earth?
I think they're still in charge, to be quite
Mm.
honest with you. And I could even tell you some locations where I think they exist. In my book, Beyond Esoteric, I talk about the Kandahar giant, which came out of a cave and confronted our US forces, killed one of our men with a big spear and a lance, but they kept shooting him and aiming for the eyes and finally took this guy down. And it was massive. They had to bring in a helicopter and a net, and they took him out. And when they got him out of Afghanistan, where'd they take him? Wright-Patterson Air Base in Ohio. And that's where all the alien species also go to be examined in an underground base. There's a great story of remember the TV show The Honeymooners with Jackie Gleason, the big guy, to the moon, Alice. Well, he was super fascinated with extraterrestrials, and he was good buddies with Richard Nixon. Kept asking him, take me to see some of the alien. I want to see an alien, a dead body or whatever. Where did they go? Underground base of Wright-Pat. And he showed him alien species. So that's where they go to examine these guys. If they ever catch a live specimen or a dead one, such as the Kandahar giant. But I met Luigi Muscas at a convention once, and he did a book on the Sardinian giants. And he says there is still a valley on the island of Sardinia in the Mediterranean Sea, the Italian island, where it's off limits. But he showed in his presentation and in his book these giant tombs, these megalithic structures built by giants. And as I said in your radio show, it's now called Cyclopean architecture, built by giants, the one-eyed giant from Homer, Bronze Age literature going way, way back. And isn't it interesting that the Cyclops was encountered near Sicily, which is also an Italian island in the Mediterranean, not too far from Sardinia. Also, I would propose that some of these Annunaki or Nephilim hybrid also exists in Antarctica. And this is where they still feel they hold dominion over the planet. And you get the elites going to Antarctica to get their marching order from, I would propose, some of these under ice bases where they are still running the show.
That's a heavy statement. That says a lot right there. That's speaking to, so if that's true, where do they speak back to off planet, or do they? Is there still an influence that's off planet to that? Is that draconian, or what is that?
Or that would be Planet X, this mysterious planet in our solar system, takes a very oblong rotation around the sun, but every so often it will come into our near orbit. And if it gets anywhere near planet Earth, it will trigger a pole shift just because of its gravitational force. It's said to be about the size of Jupiter, so it's a big one. And if it comes through near Earth orbit, it will trigger a pole shift just because of the gravity attraction of our planet would shift the plates on this planet, and volcanoes and massive earthquakes, continents will rise and fall. And that what could be the trigger every 22,000 years or so when this planet comes around. And it said that's where the Anunnaki come from.
My goodness. Well, there has to be an overseeing power, a God force, a light force, or something that still puts all of this somehow in check, because life has gone on despite these giants and a controlling system and so on. There's still been development and evolvement spiritually in society, although albeit a little slow, but there's been evolvement over time. So how do you see, let me ask you this. I'm going to dive deep here. What do you think about the central sun? What's your take on the central sun?
Well, do you mean the black sun that was
The all that is sun, the sun where
all that is. Or the
the
sun in the center of the planet too. There is also supposed to be another light source, energy source coming from within. And that's very interesting because another thing Michael Sala told me about Antarctica when I was going down there, he said, look into how the cosmic rays, which normally only bombard the planet from outside, but in Antarctica, they are detected leaving the earth. Cosmic rays are coming out of the earth, presumably from this large hole in the ice near the South Pole. And that is part of the measurements, some of these very sensitive instruments that they use. And one of my colleagues, another person who speaks about Antarctica, spent a year and a day at the South Pole. His name is Eric Hecker. He said he worked with some of these instruments and was well aware that they were doing this monitoring of these cosmic rays, which are leaving the earth. And why in Antarctica? Why around the South Pole? Why are they doing these ice cube experiments, as they're known, right there on the polar plateau, which is over 2 miles deep of ice, unless there is some kind of giant gaping hole where they're coming out of. So that makes Antarctica all the more intriguing right there as well, that they're even doing monitoring and very high technological tests of these cosmic rays leaving the planet.
absolutely. And those of us that are empaths or work with healing or light or whatever, just empaths in general, we can feel these rays. We can feel this energy that's coming up out of the earth more so right now. It seems to be more prevalent than before. So I don't know what's exactly happening, but there does feel like, if I can say it this way, Mother Earth is letting off more energy at this point in time for some reason.
And it would behoove me to point out that maybe that has to do with human consciousness now starting to wake up. So we have a measurable outpouring of humans who are now becoming awakened. And when they come into these superhuman abilities, they will affect change in the world itself. And that's why I say the revolution is consciousness. The revolution is us waking up. And the more of us that do will then increase that psychic signature coming forth from this planet. And that will also alert the other benevolent ET races that the humans are finally waking up. And what a great time to be alive and to just have a little skin in the game. That's why I always say to people, and they sometimes come up to me at conferences or people I know or communicate with me through social media, that I can't handle this planet. It's just so intense. These indigo children who are born here, and it's just so heavy on them that the weight of Earth is just, they can't handle it, and they want to just check out and they want to leave. And I say, you can't do that. You really got to stay in this, and we need everybody in this. And even if you're only just being aware of what's going on, that's all that's required. That's all we need. So
I love that. That's so important, because I know that sentiment is definitely reigning true through my colleagues. And it's a heavier time just because of the amount of people that are challenged in the changes that are happening, and they're feeling, the average person out there is feeling a little more stressed in the last few years than had been previously, perhaps. So your sentiment is perfect. Even if you're just being, that's all that matters. You're part of it and you matter. And I love that you just said that,
right,
because we need that. You're right. We need to just stay together and connect together and be in the light together, technically. All the things that, let's say if there are nefarious agendas, or have been nefarious agendas for power, for control, for human DNA, for whatever all that may be, I believe that there's equal light to that, or greater. let's say, poor behavior, poor choices. Now, have you talked to people and have you encountered the benevolent ETs that are all different kinds? And if so, which ones coming from where are the ones that are more joyful to interact with?
Well, it's a big universe out there, as we all know, but it's also a multi-dimensional universe. And this is when some people who even study UFOs and extraterrestrials are looking into this and trying to wrap their minds around it. Because just keep in mind, we've always been taught, oh, look to the skies, extraterrestrials from outside our planet are going to come here, flying in these craft, and they're coming from a long, far away. Well, what about right below our feet, the inner terrestrials that could be here in the inner earth or in the deep underground military bases, the DUMBs, which we know that there is in inner earth. There are
Look out.
worlds below our feet right here on planet Earth, and even under the ice. Those would be inner terrestrials existing here on this planet. And I believe that is their workaround from the prime directive, because they too are of this planet. So they can do things such as abduct and eat humans. So look, we're not at the top of the food chain here, people. I have a whole chapter in Beyond Esoteric called Being Aware of Predatory Species, making people aware that to some, we are a food source. All the abductees, all the cattle mutilations that have occurred are coming from these malevolent service to self ETs. And they have a right to do it because they're of this planet as well as interterrestrials. But the bigger picture then, especially of some of these etheric or angelic realms, they are ultra terrestrials. They're interdimensional extraterrestrials that come from maybe far, far away, but maybe right here also of an interdimensional species. That's why it was said when we started lighting up the first atomic bombs, even during the Manhattan Project, before Hiroshima and Nagasaki, there would be a huge assemblage of UFO crafts witnessing these atomic bombs. And it was kind of like an alarm clock went off. Oh my gosh, the humans have atomic energy and atomic bombs now. We better start watching them. But also on an ultra terrestrial level, by blowing up those atomic bombs, we were also affecting other interterrestrial or ultra terrestrial civilizations right here, right now, right in all these multidimensional aspects of this planet. And it affected them as well. So it was like they were having their morning tea, and then all of a sudden, boom, an atomic bomb goes off and affects them, in an interdimensional kind of way, and say, we better keep an eye on those humans. It's like little kids with a pack of matches in a dry field. They could create some problems here for us. And this is fast forward to the time we're at today, and there is a lot of attention on planet Earth right now. This is the greatest show in the universe. They're watching us to see what we're going to do, and they will prevent us from blowing this planet up, but not to the point where we can do a lot of destruction as well, using other forms and scenarios like Fukushima, where tsunami will wreak havoc with a nuclear reactor, and it's still bleeding off radioactive material into the Pacific Ocean. I mean, we are these little kids playing around with matches, and we sometimes burn a field down. Or
it's
in this
so
case,
you know, I know you were affected by Fukushima over there. I've been taking potassium iodide probably ever since, but the leaves on my orange tree out back bubbled orange and then fell off. after that. And
Wow.
I went out and put my hand on the tree every day and would hold on to the tree, and I would pray over the tree completely. And a year or two later, it came back fully. And then the raccoons found it, and the raccoon and I would sit there and eat the peaches together again. So the tree was healed. All the leaves came back, everything happened. But that's also speaking to, besides our destructive nature, our loving co-creative nature that can be as simple as that. You just, put your love back into something where we see this destruction happening, and maybe we can bring that light through each one of us somehow, right? I mean, maybe we've got more potential than we give ourselves credit for on this earth plane. And those civilizations you've been showcasing, and all the information in your books is showcasing also the sustainability of that kind of knowledge. So where you were talking about the megaliths, and you were talking about the seams in the building materials and so on, that can't be done in modern building techniques. But what it can be done with is ancient technology that manipulates and moves energy in a way that's for the good. It's for the betterment of society. So I think that's the hinge point that we're talking about. And to contemplate, perhaps, is everything in my day for good? Is it for uplifting someone else or something, or contributing something joyful or positive, or is it part of the negative old story? Yes, we're waking up from the old story, but isn't the old story boring now? Doesn't it seem, it seems so old? It's like, let's go. Come on, let's go.
It is stale, and it's starting to, the cracks are forming, and it's becoming more and more obvious to people. This hoodwinking, this keeping us uninformed and trying to trick us once again. It's like the old Abraham Lincoln quote: fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me for not getting it. So people are now finally understanding the media is propaganda. They're trying to push an agenda all the time, oftentimes adverse to what we would prefer to have as far as being sovereign human beings. They're trying to change our physiology, this whole transhuman agenda, which is another chapter in Beyond Esoteric, that I think people really have to be made aware of. This was my whole motivation in doing these books, to just give people the power of knowledge, of knowing all this stuff that has just been kept from us for so darn long, and just feeling we have a right to know it. And so knowing it myself and coming into contact with it and articulating it into these 3 books in the esoteric series has just been my way of contributing, my way of just giving and being service to others, and letting them know what I have spent a lifetime endeavoring to understand and know myself. So that's how I would, I guess I would like to be remembered, as someone who just tried to give people the opportunity to understand these subjects that we've been talking about on the radio show and here on the Patreon channel, to give them the opportunity to tap into all that has been withheld from us and is now coming full board above ground. And that is the Great Awakening.
Well, you have done such a magnificent job in delivering that. I really can't say that enough. And I'm going to say it again. These books need to be part of a curriculum. And so maybe if I say that enough times to the universe, it'll happen.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
They are the history, and they need to come forth. There's probably more yet that will arise, but this is very powerful. The series is powerful, and it's timely. And I can't say that enough. It's timely. So, you've really you've been given the gift to put this together and take your life's work and be able to deliver it in this way. And you've covered all the bases. That's what's so amazing. That, I mean, it just blew me away to look at what you've taken time to put down and all the history and the research along with. You have magnificent quotes in these books. You have incredible data research that helps the average person really understand, without it seeming overwhelming or intimidating, that there's just so much, and here's why. So any age could read this and walk away with so much knowledge and a more than a basic understanding. So again, if you want to get your signed copy, you can go to CCC publishing, right? .com, Beyond Esoteric, Modern Esoteric, and Future Esoteric. And Brad Olsen, I can't say thank you enough for being with us and taking your time today and being on the radio shows and all that. This has been a pleasure. And I hope you'll come back and visit us again, because I'm sure I'll get questions after this. So thank you so much. And I hope that you and your conference is upcoming, your summit that's upcoming in Shasta, for all of you that want to attend in person. It's the Living Truth Summit Part 2 in Shasta in September. And then he has an entire list. You can go to bradolsen.com. So what would you like to close with? What would you like to share with people?
Well, similar to what we were saying earlier, and that is, don't give up hope. Every one of us has a role to play in this. You will die eventually, but don't take your life prematurely, because just having your mind into the golden age, how the human race is going to transform, is really all you need to do. You don't have to have a radio show. You don't have to write books. You just have to be aware that this is the greatest moment of all lifetimes that you will ever experience. So just sit back and enjoy the show, but to be prepared and know that the dark forces that have kept us enslaved and in this mental construct for many millennia, they're not going to go down without a fight. So there will be still some bumps in the road, but that's all they're going to be in the long term. They will try to do some things like restrict us from food. They might even throw an EMP attack. It's going to get worse before it gets better. Unfortunately, it pains me to say that, but I only say it because I want people to be ready in any kind of circumstance to weather the storm. Because when we come out of this on the other end, then we will be preparing the planned golden age, and it's going to be a glorious time to witness and be in this all together. And someday we'll look back on this and be really glad that we kept the faith and soldiered through these dark times before we entered this glorious new golden age, which is prophesized in every culture. And I have no doubt that we are on timeline 1, and this will be the destiny of the human race, and give our future generations a beautiful planet to live on. And that's going to make all the world's difference. So as you said, I'll be speaking at Mount Shasta. Hope you can make it out for it, Winifred. It would be great to
I'd love
see you
to
up
be
there.
there.
On Monday, we're
Yes.
going to go up on the land. So I think it's September 16, 17, 18, 19, give or take a day. It's that weekend in middle September. And I do know right now he's doing a promotion on the Living Truth Summit website. It's a 2-for-1. So if you get your ticket now, you can go 2 people or half price. I'm not sure how he's arranging
Super.
that, but we're trying to get a sold out show, and I'm sure it will be. But it's a great conference. I know a lot of people, other speakers that are going, and it's a great lineup, and look forward to meeting everybody too. And I'll have copies of my books there as well, and signed copies at the table there as well.
Love it. Well, Brad, thank you so much. We'll hope that the trumpets flare and all our heads go back, and we we rise together. And so thank you so much for all of your life's worth. and all of your knowledge today and the other days. So go jolly, everybody, and go make somebody else's life brighter. Mr. Brad Olsen here, and you can go to bradolsen.com and you can get your copies of the books and you can get them autographed as well. So very special day. Thank you very, very much. And being the kickoff shows on the radio show for the new Making Life Brighter from the Quantum Galaxy Network, preparing the planet and all of us for the golden age. So thank you.
Oh, you're very welcome. Thanks for having me on, and we certainly will do it again sometime.
All right. Go jolly, everybody. Talk again. Bye, Brad. One man is growing old and one man is being told that his land is not his own now. He has no place called home. He must learn to be and grow and find time to